Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GSD Get Shit Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. Also, Eva.ai, an HR tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe that GSD, that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, and opportunities are not. Today, we have 176 companies inside our portfolio representing 73 countries around the world. And with that, I have an incredible guest today. I'd like to introduce David Flynn. David Flynn is a founder and chief executive officer and a recognized leader in IT innovation. Has been architecting disruptive computing solutions since his early work in supercomputing in Linux. He pioneered the use of flash disk for enterprise application acceleration as a founder and former CEO of Fusion.io, which was acquired by SanDisk in 2014. He served as Fusion.io president and CEO until May 2013. He's overseen all operation, was responsible for the company's strategic direction, as well as a visionary behind the company's innovative technology and market strategy. Preceding this position, he's a technical founder and CTO of Fusion, where he created the company's foundational research and development. Quite a wide, interesting background. He served as chief architect of Linux Network for all of us out there, where he's instrumental in the creation of the Open Fabric stack and designed several of the world's largest supercomputers, leverage Linux clustering, InfoBand, RDMA based technologies, and also served as a Project Black Dog's chief scientist. Oh, I love that. And vice president of engineering. So he's got over 100 patents, and he actually graduated from Brigham Young. So it's great to have him on board today. So, hey, David, so I spent a lot of time in Salt Lake City myself. So I've been going up there quite a bit, have a lot of friends and fellow investors that are in Utah and also St. George. I go out there to the Technical University and I do some volunteer work.
Well, yep, I lived there for many years, Bay Area now, but yep, there, Salt Lake and Provo while I went to BYU. Great, yeah, that's tech hubs, the Silicon Slopes, as they call it.
Yeah, the Silicon. You know, the thing is, I have a number of companies from that region, and the one thing that we see is that they're very conservative, right? They're very and I tell them, you know, it's like having a Ferrari out of garage. You got to not only take it out, but you got to win the race.
Yep, exactly.
So tell me a little bit about it. So let's go down through in terms of, you know, Hammerspace and some of the things. How do you go from, you know, being an engineer to being the CEO of a company? What kind of mental transition did you have to make to get to that? Because, you know, it's not sometimes a straight shot, is it?
No, it's not. So, you know, I taught myself programming as a hobbyist, and always passionate about technology. I guess started turning more towards the business side of things when in early 2000s, I found myself doing work in the high performance computing area, building large Linux clusters for the US Department of Energy, some of the largest in the world, that required a lot more interfacing with the customer. But of course, these were highly technical customers, so that helped the transition. And, you know, super cool getting to build supercomputers like that. Then I ran into this serial entrepreneur, Mr. Rick White, who convinced me to leave the coolest job that any engineer could ever dream to do, building big supercomputers with massive budgets and all of that, convinced me to go and do this project with him that was a security device, a thumb drive that ran Linux on a thumb drive for a security token. And when that wrapped up, we set out and built the company Fusion.io. I started as the CTO, and he said, I'll run it for the first year, but I'm not much good as a CEO after the first year. So what led to stepping into the business side of things was we had gone through, Rick the first year, and then we tried another CEO who didn't work out, and caused a bit of trauma for the company. Finally, as we were raising some financing round, Mark Andreessen, Mr. Netscape, Andreessen Horowitz, Mark said, David, we did not invest in your financings thus far because you clearly didn't have a CEO that we could depend on. And Mark Andreessen is a really big believer in the tech founder as the CEO.
No,
So
I
he
know
said,
that. I understand that. And when I got some mixed opinions on it because, it's so I remember the course at Stanford. It was a storytelling course. And, the one thing is, especially today, and I have a wide background myself, right? So, but mine's a little different because I'm a clinical psychologist and, undergraduate in business, then went on into a PhD program and that kind of thing. But the whole idea after psychology, by the way, different direction. But what happened is you understand, I think it's right in terms of because 70% of the founders have technical backgrounds. But the one thing, especially today, is how do you take the world and paint pictures with words and captivate people's attention? Because this thing is moving so quickly, David, seriously. I've been in tech in Silicon Valley for 44 years, just FYI. So I started my first company 44 years ago. So I know a little bit about it. And I'm not saying, I know that I don't know. That's the other thing, right? And I remember I was right here, actually where I am right now with Scott McNeely from Sun Microsystems. Literally where I'm sitting now is about 200 feet away. And we were having
I met Scott when he was running Permabit back in the Fusion IO days. So
that's a long time ago, yeah?
Yep. Well, 2010, 2011 timeframe. Yeah, a good 15 years ago.
A long time out here. Anyhow, I remember him. He was telling me, always make it look bigger than what it is. And I said, what do you mean? He said, at Sun, the thing is we made really thick boxes to ship the workstations. We came up with a story, the Sun, Stanford University Network, Solaris, we started getting into it. He said, make it look bigger than what it is. And he said, part of it is, the magic, the enchantment. And then, my friend Pihong Chen, by the way, if you're listening, Pihong, hello, who's the father of e-commerce and one of the early investors in Siebel, Sina Ufida in China, Broad Vision. So if you remember the Broad Vision days, he said, paint the pictures. And he's also a technical guy, PhD, computer science. But it's really important. And, we got to get out of the box because it's not just about the US anymore, is it? It's about the rest of the world. We're in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia. There's 1.3 billion people on that continent, and they're growing. So it's how do we get out there? And I think you've exemplified it. Coming from where you Brigham Young and then going out and shifting in that direction. I had to do it. I remember when I was in graduate school, I got put in front of the mainframe computer, not because I wanted to, because I had a fellowship and they put me in front of the mainframe and said I had to do work. I had never been in front of a mainframe in my life, And so I get in front of this thing and I remember sitting down with it. Now, remember, I'm a psychologist, but I also had enough courses to get a graduate degree in statistics. So I'm sitting there doing this stuff with punch cards. You're too young to remember this, but I was doing it.
And I hung out at the lab with my dad. So I actually, remember those days.
I was doing these punch cards, and I remember I sat down and there was a terminal there, and there was a program called Fritz, and it was a humanistic psychology kind of program that would say, "How are you today?" And I was fascinated. And the day I was there, I said, when is the capacity of this system equal the capacity of the human brain? I remember the day that I did it. So I go through graduate school. I was 22 years old, 23, got finished with my coursework, went back and got my degree because I was too busy, but I got in tech, right? And I stole some of the first Apple computers, Apple IIs. right? Right after the ones the wooden box, it was amazing. I thought this is unbelievable. This stuff is incredible. It's going to change everything. And you know, as we've gone down through this journey, you know, I mean, you've made a phenomenal leap. How does where you are today with Hammerspace, how is that progressing? How do you dominate the world? How do you, the other thing is, David,
Mhm.
how do you keep a positive attitude as a CEO? Because you have ups and downs and ins and outs every day, right? So, number
Yeah.
one is how do you manage a global business? How do you grow the business? And then how do you stay positive as you're going down through this process?
Well, taking those in reverse order, because I think staying positive is probably the most important thing. And for me, that's just do something that you love. You got to be passionate about it, and that's why I think the path of being a technologist and just enjoying the technology side of thing, and then it's just to amplify that, to see the light of day, and to have a major impact on the industry. So that's number one, is just do something that you love, have a mission that you're really bought into. I was very successful with Fusion IO. We went from first revenue to a quarter billion a year in just 3 years,
Wow.
and return 100x, second highest IRR ever, second only to Juniper Networks, and that didn't count because they were a 1999 during the heyday, during the bubble, whereas Fusion IO went through 2008 and 2010 and did 100x.
Wow,
And
I love that. By the way, we did an IPO on Nasdaq in March when the market went down. We were scheduled in April. We ended up doing IPO in June, and people said, "Don't do it, don't do it," and
yeah, yeah,
hold off. But we did a historical analysis, and we said if we don't do this thing, the probability of going bankrupt or not being around is really high. So let's do it. And we're not
yeah,
going to raise nearly the money, but we did
yeah.
it. And that company was sold to Salesforce, Click Software.
Nice, nice. So you've been through this, and it at least on the first one, I mean, this was I had some minor wins being part of Larry Ellison's thin client smart terminal
Oh, I
and
remember.
interactive
I
TV,
remember.
Linux networks. Oh, sorry, Liberates Technology, Network Computer Inc. Before that, so I'd had some minor wins with that, but this was the first, real FU money, and it led to some soul searching about what to do. And it didn't take me long to come back to my roots of just what I really love to do. And so, staying positive is just do something that you love, and the global scaling, it's surround yourself by people that are very talented and that you can enjoy working with. The team makes all the difference. I wouldn't get to do what I love if I didn't hire people that were good at the other stuff. So I like to stay very involved in the technology. But if we're going to be successful as a business, you have to be not just good at building it, but good at selling it and marketing it, and strategic relationship. So it's really a chance to work with very talented people. But this brings one of the reasons why not everybody can or should make the transition is it can be difficult working with people, and it can be difficult having to worry about whether they're the appropriate people for the role and make changes and stuff. As a CEO, that's always been my biggest challenge, is when to make changes to the team, so as to have the best team. And so the interpersonal, the people thing. And it sounds like your experience or education in that area is quite helpful as a serial entrepreneur, because so much of it is just how to work with people to bring out their best and to help compensate for weaknesses, help um, uh, complement their strengths, and make the critical changes when you need to. So yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. It's really enjoy what you're doing and build a good team. A lot goes along with that. How do you attract the best talent? How do you make them want to work for you and join the mission? It goes to that storytelling, like you were saying. have that story, and it's both the story that you're telling yourself that helps stay positive and on mission, and it's the story that you're telling investors and your uh, your team and telling prospective clients. Gotta have the big vision. And for us, oh, go ahead.
No. I agree with you. And it's interesting because I've been in this AI expert system since for 29 years, and just taking away my graduate school days. But you see the changes, and I know you're looking at unstructured data, but the kind of things that we're working on. So I also own an R&D lab
Mm-hmm.
too. We're a family office, mine. But one of the things we're doing is like multi-agent large language models. We got 14 of them as a team, and they're multimodal at the same time, solving problems with empathy and compassion. And we're going out through in 2016. I started Findo, which is looking for structured and unstructured data. Then you can see at TechCrunch, and I raised about $7 million in 3 months for our company. I was a co-founder, but one of the things that I said is this world, the problem we have, David, is infobesity. I was with one of the persons from Meta last night, a high-level Meta person. We were talking about it. It's a problem. It's like there's so much unstructured data, so many. I mean, think about it. In your own world, you got about 300,000 items. The entire web in 1996 with 257,000 websites. You have more information in personal cloud, the entire web. The problem is your world is following the same trajectory, but that'd mean doubling every year. In 5 years with IoT, you're going to have 10 million. I mean, you think about this, right? Now, I just need your opinion. I had the head of the quantum lab at Harvard, Prania. I had her on my show. I had one of the actresses from Hollywood, Zen Sams. I ask everybody this, a 4-star admiral, the same thing. Over the last 2 weeks, how many times has somebody said, I sent you a message, did you get it? Right? And where did you send it? I sent it to your email. Which one? I think the corporate or Gmail or Yahoo, or maybe I sent it to WhatsApp or Telegram. I can't find it. Will you send it again? Do you experience those problems with the?
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm relating it back to where you are, because there's so much data flying around us. This infobesity challenge needs to be solved. And it's companies like Hammerspace, they're going to come to the forefront that need to come together as one to solve this issue, or nothing good's going to happen.
I'll agree with you there. And, it's interesting that you frame it that way, because, what our guiding light is that, and this has been repeated in my career, as you look at what happens in the consumer electronics world, and enterprise tends to be later adopting, and the technology has to be tailored to it. And the one that I like is the analogy is that, today, when you move from one cell phone to your next, when you replace your cell phone, it's a seamless experience. Your data is orchestrated for you. When you transition between your cell phone and your laptop, all of your data is exactly where you left it. Now, there's lots of different places, and that definitely needs to be coped with, but at least there's some consistency now that you can go at it from a different device, or even have your phone lost or stolen and replace it and have all of your stuff still there. You and I remember the day when you migrated from one PC or laptop to another, you had to copy all your stuff. And I still have nested directories, like the Russian nesting dolls. My first one nested in the next one, nested in the next one, the copy proliferation. At least at this point, there's some consistency about the logical location of the data being separated from the physical devices. Well, imagine how pathetic it is that in the enterprise, that's not the case. You have a storage system, your data is in that storage system, you have to copy it and move it to another one. And as you copy it, you end up with copy proliferation and a nightmare. We, as an industry, we virtualized compute from the very servers running it with VMware. and we virtualize networking, but data has never been decoupled from the storage, uh, to the point where the only way to move data is to copy it, and that just makes more of it. With Hammerspace, we give that orchestration experience. The data moves from behind the curtain.
Mhm.
You have a single logical location for your data to live, and you can access that logical location from within any data center, even though the data may be physically distributed and may move from time to time across those systems. So, my guiding light as an entrepreneur is look at what people have had to cope with at a consumer electronics world and the conveniences that are born there, like the use of solid state. You know,
Mhm.
NAND flash was in your cell phones and MP3 players a decade before it made it into the enterprise. And that's what Fusion IO did, was uh, learn how to deploy that same flash technology that's used in your cell phone, but for large scale data center operations, because it hadn't made that leap. It took it a decade later before that happened. And now the same thing, this conceptualization of data having a logical existence that is not bound to a physical device, but transcends the physical.
I
That's
agree. And here's the
that.
thing, right? So I'm going
Yep.
to add the one point because I think you'll like this. So I've done a lot of research. I've written almost 700 articles, by the way, and 8 books and all kinds of stuff, and 1,300 of these podcasts. But here's the thing that I found that there are about 176 zettabytes of data on the planet Earth in the corporate world, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And if we took DVDs or CDs, you know, those old things, some of you may
Hmm.
not know, but we had these round circles. And if you stacked them one on top of another, they would go 128 times between the Earth and the Moon today and growing at about 69% per year. So that corporate data, we call about infobesity. By the way, I didn't come up with that term. I read Alvin Toffler's Future Shock back in 74, and I remember that, and I never forgot it because
That's
I
a cool
thought about
term. Infobesity. Yep. I love it.
obesity. And and so taking that data and being able to manage it, it's going to cripple these companies. In fact, you know, in psychology, we have a term called learned helplessness, which means you have so much of this unstructured and structured data that you actually freeze. And we're getting to that point as humans, right? With our own personal cloud, we're getting to that point. So these next generation of tools, like these, you know, I've been using these multi-agent large language models myself, David. I had
Mhm.
100 million stem cells put in my body, right? Because everybody talks about Brian Johnson, blah, blah, blah. I said
Mhm.
I had stage 3 kidney disease because of too many ibuprofens. How will this help? It actually eliminated it,
Oh, wow. Cool.
completely eliminated it. And the kind of things that happen, you know, so access to knowledge, the knowledge is out there for companies to make decisions and to help us. But the problem is we don't know where it is. And Hammerspace is allowing you to find those, you know, as Scott used to say, these islands of automation out there, and to be able to find this islands of data to find it so you can make sense of it.
Well,
Because that's a problem.
it is a true sin that, to this day, the process of moving data from one infrastructure to another is so manual. I mean, we talk about digital automation and digital transformation, and yet the movement of data couldn't be more manual and disruptive to the ongoing access. And that's because, in the absence of having a hammer space, and by the way, I don't know if you know this, but the term hammer space is actually, it represents the pocket universe that's infinite in size and instantly accessible from anywhere. So what hyperspace is for travel, hammer space is for the storage of things in an alternate or pocket universe. And we use that conceptualization to think about data having its existence transcend the storage systems that store it,
Well, it
because it's
has
that.
to, right? That's, you know, I remember back when so I met with Salesforce back and it was thin client. They were just opened up an
Mhm,
office south of San Francisco Airport. And
mhm, mhm.
you know, that's the same idea. It's got to happen. It's going to somebody like Hammerspace is doing, dominated. But if people don't know about it, it's like having a Ferrari in the garage. You know, it's my buddies, they never take their Ferrari out, and they have a beautiful, beautiful Ferrari. You got to get it out of the garage so people see it. And you got to not only get it out of the garage and drive it around the neighborhood, you got to win Formula One. Who cares about if it's just a car? It's about winning the race. What do you need? The right pit crew, the right driver, the right aerodynamics. All those parts equal one. You know, in psychology, we call it Gestalt. The sum of the parts equal a whole. And if you do that, you know, I've worked with thousands and thousands of companies. You know, as myself in 17 of my own. So I found these companies all over the world, and each one of them, what do they need? Operational expertise, access to capital, networking, contact. Those three in a resilient team, any company can become a unicorn. You just you can pivot to success. People talk about pivoting as a circle, right? It's not a circle. If you have a Sherpa, you can move in the direction. It's crazy, actually. And so, you know, what you're doing is right. So if you look in 2016 in TechCrunch, some of the things you're doing today, I was talking about then. So exactly. And I remember, you know, I was a little early, and people said, oh, I was at the Moscone Center talking about AI. And people said, this isn't going to happen for another 25 years. This is the future, right? And I said, this isn't the future. This is now. You understand, people are inundated with data. And you're just proving corporations are dying because of it, because it's everywhere. They don't even know where it is. For one thing, is how to move it. The other thing is, where is it? And the other thing is, it could be 10 different replications of the same data. You're using, you know, 10 times as much storage or 5 times as much storage just because you don't know where the heck it is.
That's exactly right. Managing data by copy and wait loops, copying at different places, very self-defeating, because you're just making more data to manage. And people don't realize that the reason that happens is because data's very identity is actually a rendering of the infrastructure. And that's what has to change. The metadata needs to be ripped out of the storage infrastructure and be something that can stay constant, independent. And that's what a data orchestration platform does.
Okay, wait a second.
Provide you a single namespace.
Has to be taken. I want to make sure I didn't. Metadata has to be taken out of.
It has to be ripped out of the storage infrastructure, because the storage infrastructure data is a platform level abstraction. And for data to be data's identity, what data is, to be something that is served by the storage, inverts it. So now platform is subjugated to infrastructure, and it all boils down to the fact that the metadata is down in with the data. We have to pull the metadata out and have the metadata be in charge of the actual maintaining the existence of the data across the infrastructure. And that's exactly what an orchestration platform does. It pulls all of the metadata out of the storage and puts the metadata in charge of dictating where the data gets stored.
Well, the metadata knows where to look. That's the other thing you want to say.
It tracks where it is.
Purpose of where it is, right?
That's exactly right.
That's the big problem.
And it can track the many places where it might exist. And at that point, they aren't copies. They are instantiations of the one thing. So having the metadata out lets you keep metadata singular, while the data might have multiple instantiations on different systems, a different thing. Because you have the Sherpa. I love that analogy. I think of it as the card catalog. Catalog in the library knows what shelf or shelves the book is on, right? So you need to have that metadata be put in charge of the data. And right now it's the other way around. The storage is in charge of the metadata. And so you don't actually work with data. You don't talk to data. You talk to the storage and ask it for the data. You don't manage data. You manage the storage. And the data that you copy into it is magically imbued with the capabilities of that storage that it's stored on. That seems very natural to us, but it's actually the tail wagging the dog. It's very upside down. What we care about is data. Data is the thing of interest. We want to access data, we want to use data. And yet what we're having to do is access and use infrastructure and ask it, pretty please, can I have my data? And what this has led to is the fact that cloud computing is just back to the era of the mainframe. You're talking about mainframes. We live in mainframe redux. The cloud, the promise of the cloud was that you didn't have to care who owns and operates the infrastructure. But because data is a prisoner to infrastructure, once you put your data on a specific cloud, by the way, not just a given vendor, you have to choose which of their mainframes. Is it US East? Is it US West? Is it this one or that one? Because then your data is stuck there, and that's where you have to do all of your computing. So we have gone full circle. We're back in the era of the mainframe, and it is not the utility computing model that we were promised of being to tap into the power grid and run anything anywhere. You cannot do that. And it's fundamentally because data is a prisoner to that storage service or that storage system into which you put it. And the industry doesn't know any better, because all attempts in the past at decoupling data from the storage met miserable fate, because the plumbing didn't work, because the way you talk to data used to be very simple, point to point. Client connects to a storage server. Sun Microsystems pioneered that. But guess what? That doesn't work when you need to talk to many storage servers. I can't make a single connection and have it do all of the proxying to everybody. Proxying doesn't work. Remember in the early internet days when we all had internet proxies and it like totally sucked? Didn't scale.
I remember,
right?
I remember having, I'll never forget this. So it was on a Sun workstation. And I happened to go down through, and there was a technical guy alongside of me. And I said, tell me this thing. So you're saying I can surf the internet? I can go down through and look through the internet. He said, yeah. And I said, well, where's a directory of all this information? He said, let me print it out for you. And it was about this thick. I was like, this is so cool. I can't believe it. When is somebody going to make it easier?
Yeah.
You know, what you're doing is fantastic. But the other thing is, is how do you go out, and we understand that data is the problem, right? And that finding the data, if you can find it, the other thing is it has an ecological impact, because as we start to store all this data, we're massively have waste that we shouldn't have. And people are afraid, right? Companies are afraid that they're going to lose their data. And the reason they're doing so many backups, because they don't want to take a chance of being the person that loses that information or can't find it, right? So, I mean, you're right on target. How fast, now what's the impact of like multi-agent large language models from your standpoint, right? In terms of helping us in a hyper intelligent way. And then one of my friends has quantum computers over in Switzerland. And, when you talk about something, I mean, there's some things happening already, but when you have something that is 100 million times faster, that will do something that it would take 10,000 years in 200 seconds. These are real statistics, by the way. I mean, it changes everything, right? So number one is, how smart are these systems going to get? Because now when you build this hyper intelligence in a multi-agent way, I don't know, have you guys worked with multi-agent LLMs?
Yeah, no, we do. And it's interesting because it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Hammerspace, as the data orchestration, solves the multiple challenges with getting data out of legacy systems across into the right data center and then fed with sufficient levels of performance into the models for training, fine tuning, or inference, right? It all boils down to the orchestration and presentation at requisite levels of performance to these models. And it doesn't matter, the smarter the models get, the faster they get, the more burden it puts on the infrastructure to deliver more amounts of data more quickly.
Because you need the throughput.
And it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you don't have the data, you can't make sense of it. So what we're going to see as AI matures, the shift will go from the computing side, from the GPUs, from the inference hardware accelerators, to now we need to solve the supply chain of data and delivery of data on a continuous basis, because it's being generated at the edge and everywhere. So this ultimately becomes a data problem and to feed it. But then on the flip side is that, this goes into helping us solve these very problems.
Mhm.
So we use machine learning internally in our product to decide where to place and when to move data, right? So the managing a complex physical infrastructure environment, one that is geographically distributed across different data centers, that's distributed across different storage systems of different types from different vendors with different design points, managing this highly complex infrastructure ultimately cannot be done by hand. It's got to be automated. And by the way, the principles for automating it are the same ones that are used for containerized microservices orchestration.
Mhm.
It's lightweight, very granular, lightweight encapsulation. Um, it's hard to orchestrate big monolithic VMs, but if you break it into the microservices, if you put lightweight wrappers around it, a container, now you can orchestrate it. Now you can finally automate the bin packing problem. How do you pack boxes into the thing,
Mhm.
right? So one way to think of what Hammerspace does is that we're doing for the data what, say, Kubernetes does to orchestrate the compute.
Mhm.
Container, break it into little pieces, containerize them, orchestrate them based on a declarative intent, based on stating what your end goals are, not trying to prescribe how it's done. In a data orchestrated world, it's the individual file or object with its own individual metadata. That's the granularity and the encapsulation. And the data moves automatically across diverse infrastructure, physically distributed across the design spectrum, et cetera. And based on declarative intent, based on the end goals, service level objectives. So it couldn't be more parallel, the analogy with what we're seeing in containerized microservices orchestration with the data orchestration and single namespace work. And it's allows us to utilize AI finally, because now that meeting the stated objectives of billions of objects living across hundreds of different storage systems and services from different vendors at different facilities. Now all of that can get managed by something that is a machine learning technique to manage it. So AI getting better at orchestrating the data so that it can feed itself more data. So full circle.
Yeah, no, I agree. Here's another thing. I want to touch base with you. I told you about I used my LLMs when I went into the doctor, and and
Mhm.
and they said stage 3 kidney disease can't be reversed. Well, I
Mm.
just got back from Utah, by the way, and there's a lot of investments. I was meeting with my friends out there that are investors, and I said, "This is crazy. This can't be." I put in my LLM, and it went down through, and it found the top doctor in the world that's doing it, and it said that there's been 7,000 people that have had it done, and out of that, Mel Gibson
Mhm.
was on Joe Rogan talking about his dad doing it. I had not heard it before I did this, but it came back in minutes and told me exactly what I needed to do. Now there's a leap of faith, right? The point is,
Yep.
by having the control of that data, you can find things to be able to make your life better. I built an anti-cancer vaccine back in August of last year in less than 2 weeks for my dog. I found the group
Mhm.
that could actually build it in a lab. I took my dog's kidney out, and at a molecular level, I built a vaccine. Seriously, and I'm not a smart guy. I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania. You know what I mean? I'm a country boy. Seriously. And I mean, I said these superpowers that are out there. And I just want to ask you one thing. So we
Mhm.
built an omni-channel engine. So taking
Okay.
these large language models, we build an engine, and we're taking that engine. My position is everything's going to become modular, just like you're saying about the data and being able to flag it. But if I create an omni-channel engine that I can put into something, let's imagine, paint the picture. If you took LinkedIn, Facebook, Amazon, Expedia, and combined those kind of capabilities into one tool that can go out. So you're flying from here to Salt Lake City, Utah. It knows that you like to stay at the Hyatt Hotel, It knows you like to fly in Delta on the right hand side because you're medallion member, diamond. It knows everything about you. Also knows when you're there. Somebody went to Brigham Young, and you guys used to hang out. You want to go over to the to one of the centers there and hang out together and spend some time. It knows that you like to play pickleball, and it schedules a court like your grandmother. It's got the empathy and compassion of your grandmother. And what I'm saying is, I just want your opinion. Those engines we're finding, we can take them and transport them. My model, I've written, I don't know, 50 articles, I guess, about it. Transport those models from one application to another, and people don't realize this is the same stuff. These optimization algorithms, the ladder networks, variational autoencoders, ontology, those same things are very similar. So we can move it around and we can optimize everything in a hyper intelligent way, then with empathy and compassion in the model, right? Where we take pragmatic approaches to it, but you put that into the model, all of a sudden you got superpowers.
No doubt. And, there was, a year ago, as I was playing with these models, I thought, this is nice. It's remarkable that the model is able to, pass my personal Turing test of, pass itself off as if it were human. This year, as I've started to use them for development of patent portfolio and other leading edge ideas, I have found myself doing more brainstorming instead of with another engineer with the AI. And now it's like, it makes me feel superhuman because I can take very rough ideas and iterate on them and come to a conclusion. That's a very different feel than it was just a year ago. Like I said, a year ago, it was just, okay, now it's like I'm talking to a person. Now it's like I'm actually talking with not just a peer, but an expert in a field who can challenge and take an idea to the next level and then write the whole thing up. It's made me feel like a now
imagine
superpower.
this. Let me tell you what we've been able to do, right? We're taking those large language models and creating a team. So I'm not talking to one, I'm talking to a think tank. I put it on the problem of global warming. I said, here's the challenge, right? Let's go down through. How do we go down through and stop global warming? It came back with 100 pages of how to do it. And so gave themselves, so ChatGPT became the team lead, Bard, Claude, they all gave themselves different roles in this instantly. Claude was at time 1,000 times faster in mathematics. It came back, and it came back with about 100-page paper how to stop it. And I had a guy who was a lead author of the Nobel, right? So I mean, this is an environmental award back at the time of Al Gore. So anyhow, I talked to him about it. This was spot on, but here's the thing that was crazy. It came back to me and said, Gary, let me put something else together. Let me tell you how to reverse it. And it wrote it on its own. I didn't ask it to go back.
Yeah.
And so these are the kind of tools, if we use these tools, I was talking about superpowers 2 years ago. In fact, I was in a group down here in Santa Clara talking about superpowers. These do give you superpowers. Here's the other thing, David. You understand how to harness it. I have about 3,000 prompts that I use myself today. But once you harness these powers, you're like Nikola Tesla on steroids because you can find virtually everything.
Yeah, it's amazing. I took a patent portfolio of 24 patents, provisionals, and basically these had grown organically over time as the ideas were being developed, and as things got added, there ended up being a lot of overlap, and so basically went through, pulled apart all the basic concepts and basically said, hey, let's refactor it to put these things in different families, pulled the whole thing apart. And we're talking here about 250 pages worth of very dense patent material, pulled it apart, put it together in a completely different organizational structure. I mean, with understanding down to the minutia, being able to keep the whole thing just phenomenal. I mean, these are things that I wouldn't have been able to do in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had the patience. I wouldn't have had the time. It would have taken too long to be practical for me to do this with an army of patent attorneys to try to do it. I mean, like I said, at Fusion IO, we had a portfolio of somewhere between 100 and 200 patents by the time we were done. That unfortunately got sold off to a patent troll, and then they extorted the industry. So made hundreds of millions of dollars on it, but that wasn't why I built them in the first place. Anyway, what you can do now is just remarkable from that perspective, and truly makes you feel superhuman, to the point of I'm going, if I lost access to these models, or if this one, because by the way, I had to do some significant hunting to find a model that could actually keep that context and pull it apart. The Chat GPT, even the 4.0 and what can't do it. It's select the ones that can handle the very large context windows and not lose attention to detail when basically rewriting a 200 plus page document. You've probably seen how they you draw their attention to this and to make this edit, and it'll lose all of the attention to everything else and just like summarize it and lose all of your detail. Anyway, so cool stuff. It's very powerful tools, and great time to be alive and to see how the industry goes. But there's so much that's lacking in terms of using this technology to solve basic issues. And the most basic issues of where does data live and how do you move it is so arcane today. It's like the laptop era when you had to copy your home directories from one place to another and ended up with, copy after copy after copy, because you didn't want to clutter your new space with the old thing, and you didn't, right?
Exactly.
So literally I could go back. It's like being an archaeologist and going back through time and looking at that nested. Now, luckily, capacity grew exponentially, so that early stuff didn't take a lot of space. So right, but it does take a lot of space. Cognitive load is the thing, our own cognitive load, and the cognitive load on organizations to deal with data copy proliferation is just unbearable in terms of that complexity. And the AI arms race right now is the forcing function to cause enterprises to reckon with the arcane way data is managed through copy and wait loops, through downtime and data migrations. And you want to hear the crazy thing though? The leading vendors in selling storage infrastructure, they're saying, oh, you got to move from that silo to move to our silo. They're selling you just the same old thing again.
Yeah.
We have a shiny new silo. This one has better scale. It's larger, and it's a better fit. It's a one size fits all. That's a better fit. We'll be the silo to end all silos. It's like that false promise. It's like there's this new demand space. We need a certain level of performance and capacity. Hammerspace, on the other hand, is saying, look, we need to get rid of the siloing altogether. We need to add an abstraction layer here and have metadata in charge of where the data lives, so you can use any storage.
Anywhere, anytime, any place.
That's right. Because this isn't the last time we're going to have a sea change in the demand. We have to now decouple, and that comes from separating metadata from data, changing the highway system on which the data flows to not be a single lane road anymore, but to be a multi-lane superhighway. And that's what we've done. I don't know if you know this, but our CTO is the kernel maintainer of the part of the Linux kernel that does the storage networking, the network file system stack. So how Linux consumes network shared data. And that's where we've innovated with making it not just a one-to-one relationship where everything has to be proxied through a single target. Now it's a one-to-many, because you can connect to a control plane that routes it to any number of storage systems. It's like being able to talk to a card catalog and then talk to any bookshelf. Whereas before you were bolted directly to a bookshelf, right? And that doesn't make any sense, just to have, you know, one bookshelf having to route access through to others. Doesn't make any sense. Talk to the card catalog and get access to any of the bookshelves. So very powerful concepts that only now are finding the light of day because there wasn't enough of a forcing function before. AI is the forcing function causing us to reckon with the accrued bad practices of copying crap around that we all knew was terrible when we did it of our own personal data between laptops, and we've all now lived in this orchestrated world. So now we just need to move the enterprise to where their data can be orchestrated.
Okay, so I want to, so just for the audience out there, I know what the answer to the question is, right? What happens if companies over the next 3 to 5 years don't do this and they stay in this present form and they don't use something like Hammerspace? What's going to happen to their business and how competitive are they going to be?
You're going to be, it's going to be like in the Stone Ages.
Right? Dinosaurs. I say dinosaurs.
Yeah. It's living in a two-dimensional world.
What's going to happen to them if they don't innovate?
Yeah. You're going to be left behind because the velocity and volume of data and the venues across which you need to access it growing exponentially. And the old model of copying things around or using tooling to copy it, doing it in the imperative through process, procedure, and tools won't work. We have to put all of the data behind a single namespace and have the data movement be fully automated based on stated intent. And only in that world can we deal with these 3 V's, the volume, velocity, and the variety of the venues that you need to work on it. Because AI is driving all of those, the amount of data, the speed that you need to get it at. And because AI requires access to the power grid, you can only put so much of it in one place, right? So it's going to be geographically distributed. And so now all of a sudden, it's not a luxury to be able to run your stuff in different geographies, in different clouds, or in different locations. It's like it's a necessity just to be able to get the availability of the GPUs. And so we have to move from the old world where it was so difficult to move data that we actually advocated move the compute to the data. You might remember that phrase, move the compute to the data, because data gravity is so big, the applications have to live in orbit around the data. That doesn't work in a GPU computing world because the processing takes such horsepower that you have to seek that out. So now the data needs to be able to move. The way I like to say it is the only thing with more gravity than data are the GPUs that you need to run it. Those GPUs, massive, hundreds of kilowatts in a single rack now they're talking about. They're actually talking about the first megawatt rack, a single rack burning a megawatt of power. Is that like crazy?
Yeah, no, I tell you, I remember having a call with Jensen a couple of years ago when we were forming my company. So when we did Findo, and I've known him for a number of years, and he was painting the pictures, and I mean, what we talked about then is happening now. And for all of us, just to go back, I mean, you're very, if you don't do it, the companies are going to die. So it's not about the Stone Age. You're not going to be able to compete. So if you don't have something like Hammerspace, you're dead. Like literally, you're not going to be able to compete, and you don't want to do that. Stay up in the technology. As David said today, that these technologies give you superpowers to be able to do things that are uncanny. Each one of us need to have those superpowers, and it can be democratized. But if you don't do it, you're going to very quickly see people go way far ahead of you. They're going to have a lot more money. They're going to have a lot more prestige. They're going to have a lot more visibility. And they're going to be way more efficient than they could ever do because they do have the power of a Nikola Tesla on steroids. So it's a great point. David, closing thoughts and how do people get a hold of you?
Hammerspace.com and just David.Flynn, Hammerspace.com. Happy to have a reach out. Yeah, gotta move to a world where data is movable and not stuck.
Move fast. This isn't about staying back behind. This is about going from the Stone Ages and dinosaurs to rockets, and you need to move very, very quickly in this. David, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule.
My pleasure.
I'll come back after we end the show and just to say goodbye to you. But to all my audience out there, thanks for joining one more time. GSD presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back again soon with another exciting edition. And thanks to all of you. We just hit a million views, and I appreciate it. Let's go out and get them. Like and subscribe, and we'll be back to you again soon. Thank you.